The last light. My wife died on a Tuesday in March, and for the 7 months that followed, I did not do anything that I could not stop doing. I want to be specific about that. I did not start projects. I did not make plans. I did not buy a book I could not finish in one sitting. I ate when I remembered to. I slept when I could. I went to the funeral, and I went to the lawyer, and I went to the meetings with the financial advisor, and I sat in our kitchen in the evenings, and I did not look at the chair across the table from me, because the chair across the table from me was still where Margaret had sat for 38 years, and looking at it required a kind of strength I did not have. In October, I took a job as a winter caretaker at the Tillamook Rock Lighthouse on the Oregon coast. The job was 6 months. The job was alone. The job was, in every practical sense, a kind of supervised disappearance. I was responsible for maintaining the property, keeping the foghorn running for the few fishing boats that still used the channel, and reporting in to the Coast Guard once a week by radio. Beyond that, I would see no one. No mail, no deliveries, no visitors, just me and the rock and the sea and the wind and a small stone cottage attached to the base of the light tower, and 6 months of weather to get through. I took the job because I wanted to stop having to talk to people about Margaret. I took the job because I wanted to stop being looked at with that particular kind of pity that widowers learn to recognize. The soft tilt of the head, the slow blink, the "how are you holding up?" I took the job because every room in our house held something of hers, and I could not bear the slow archaeology of putting her things in boxes. I took the job because the man who had been Margaret's husband for 38 years was, for the first time in his adult life, a person with no one waiting for him at the end of the day. And that fact was so large and so quiet that I could not be in the same house with it. I told myself I took the job because I wanted solitude. That was true. It was also not the whole truth. But I did not let myself look at the rest of it then. I am going to let myself look at it now. The Tillamook Rock Lighthouse sits about 1.25 miles offshore from the Oregon coast, on a small basalt rock that rises out of the Pacific like a fist. The lighthouse itself was decommissioned in 1957, but the structure is still maintained as a private property, and a small fishing cooperative still pays for the foghorn to be kept running through the winter. A helicopter dropped me off on a grey afternoon in late October, with 3 months of supplies, a satellite phone for emergencies, a single-band radio for weekly check-ins, and the understanding that a resupply chopper would come at the end of January and another at the end of March, weather permitting. The pilot waved at me as he lifted off. He was the last person I saw for 43 days. The first month was peaceful. I want to say that clearly because what came after has a way of overshadowing what came before. And what came before was the only month of real peace I had had since Margaret died. The work was simple. I checked the foghorn 3 times a day. I cleaned the lens of the old lantern even though it no longer turned. I walked the perimeter of the rock in the afternoons when the swell was low enough to permit it, and I watched the gulls and the cormorants and once a pod of orcas passing south. I read books I had brought with me. I drank coffee in the mornings and whiskey in the evenings, and I slept better than I had slept since the diagnosis. I cried a great deal in that first month. I want to be honest about that too. I cried in a way I had not let myself cry in the 7 months of meetings and paperwork and casseroles brought to the door by people who meant well. I cried in the cottage at night with the wind off the Pacific shaking the windows in their frames. I cried at the kitchen table while reading a book she had given me for Christmas the year before her diagnosis. I cried while watching a storm come in from the west, the clouds black and low, and the rain hitting the windows hard enough to feel like a blessing. I think I needed the crying. I think I had not been able to do it where anyone could see me, and the rock was the first place in 7 months where no one could see me. By the end of November, I felt almost human again. I felt almost as if I might survive. That was when I saw the light. I saw it for the first time on the 2nd of December, around 11 o'clock at night. I was at the kitchen window of the cottage, washing a single plate and a single fork, and I looked up at the dark Pacific the way I had looked up 100 times in the previous month, not searching for anything, just allowing my eyes to rest on the largest thing in my view. And there, perhaps a mile out on the water, was a small yellow light. It was steady. It was not a ship. A ship at that distance would show running lights, port and starboard. red and green, a masthead white. This was a single warm yellow light, the color of a kerosene lantern, and it was moving very slowly across the surface of the sea. I watched it for perhaps 10 minutes. It moved north along the line of the coast, parallel to the rock, at the speed of a person walking. It did not flicker, it did not dim, it did not behave the way a light on the water should behave in a swell. I told myself it was a fishing boat. I told myself it was a kayaker who had gotten badly lost. I told myself it was a reflection of my own kitchen lamp on the glass, even though my kitchen lamp was an LED bulb and the wrong color and behind me anyway. I told myself a great many things. I went to bed. I did not sleep well. The next night the light was closer. It was at perhaps 3/4 of a mile, and it had moved to a position directly west of the rock, and it was no longer traveling. It was simply there. I watched it from the kitchen window for almost an hour. It did not move. It did not change. The wind was high that night, and the swell was substantial, and a lantern carried by anything floating on the water should have bobbed and pitched and described a chaotic line in the dark. The light stayed perfectly level, as if the person carrying it was walking on solid ground. I want to tell you that I called the Coast Guard. I want to tell you that I did the responsible thing, the trained thing, the thing a caretaker was meant to do when he saw something on the water that did not belong there. I did not. I do not have a clean reason. I have only the truth, which is this. I knew somehow, even on the second night, that what I was looking at was not a thing the Coast Guard could help with. And I knew somehow that to report it would be to set in motion a series of events that would end with me being removed from the rock. By helicopter, by stretcher, by whatever means it took. And I did not want to be removed from the rock. I wanted very badly to see what came next. That should have frightened me. It did frighten me. It also did not stop me from going back to the window the following night. The light came closer every evening for 19 days. I am going to spare you the daily catalogue of it. I will tell you only that by the 8th of December, the light was at half a mile, and by the 15th it was at a quarter. And by the 21st, I could see faintly, in the lantern's glow, the suggestion of a figure carrying it. A small figure, the size of a woman. By Christmas Eve, the light was perhaps 100 yards off the western face of the rock. And on Christmas Day, I did not look at the window because I was afraid of what I would see. And because it was the first Christmas I had spent without Margaret in 39 years, and I did not have the strength. On the 26th of December, I looked. The light was at the base of the rock. The figure carrying it was standing on the surface of the water at the foot of the cliff, looking up at my cottage, holding the lantern raised a little, the way a person holds a light when they want to see something in the dark. I could not see the face. The lantern light was too low, but I could see the shape of her, and I could see that she was wearing what looked like the long grey wool coat Margaret had worn the winter she got sick, the one I had not been able to bring myself to give to Goodwill, the one that was hanging in the closet of our house in Salem at that very moment. I went to bed. I did not sleep. I did not look out the window again that night. In the morning, the light was gone. The water at the base of the rock was empty. The waves came in and broke on the basalt the way they had broken on it for 10,000 years. I almost convinced myself it had not happened. That night she was on the rock. I did not see her arrive. I had been at the kitchen table drinking coffee. I had stopped drinking whiskey after the second night with the light. Some animal instinct towards sobriety I had not quite been able to articulate, and I had been reading, or pretending to read, with the curtains drawn. I heard nothing. There was no sound of climbing, no sound of footsteps. There was simply, at a certain point in the evening, the awareness that the light was no longer outside the cottage. It was on the small flat shelf of rock just beyond the kitchen window, where I sometimes sat in the afternoons to drink my coffee and watch the cormorants. She was sitting on the bench I used. The lantern was beside her. She was looking out at the sea, away from the cottage. She was wearing Margaret's coat. The hood was down. Her hair was Margaret's hair, the way it had looked the year before the chemotherapy. I stood at the kitchen window for a long time, and I looked at the back of her head, and I felt my chest fill with something I had not felt in 7 months, and I did not move. She did not turn around. She did not knock on the door. She did not call my name. She simply sat on the bench, in the cold and the wind, with the lantern beside her, and she looked at the sea. She sat there for 3 hours. Then, sometime around 2 in the morning, the light went out, and when I looked again, the bench was empty. She came back the next night, and the night after. For 4 nights, she sat on the bench with her back to the cottage, and I watched her from the kitchen window, and I did not go outside, and she did not turn around. On the 5th night, I made a pot of coffee, and I poured 2 cups, and I carried them out onto the rock, and I sat down on the bench beside her. She did not look at me when I sat down. She kept her face turned toward the sea. I set the 2nd cup of coffee on the rock beside her, the way I had set a 2nd cup of coffee on Margaret's nightstand every morning for 38 years. And I held my own cup with both hands, and I felt the warmth of it through the ceramic, and I did not say anything. After a while she said, "You shouldn't have come out, Ed." The voice was Margaret's voice. It was Margaret's voice exactly. It had the small catch in it that she had always had, the slight smoke roughness from the cigarettes she had quit 40 years ago and that her voice had never quite forgotten. I said, "I know." She said, "You're not supposed to be able to. The rules are very specific. You're supposed to watch from the window." I said, "I never was very good at rules." She made a small sound that was almost a laugh. It was Margaret's laugh. It was the laugh I had heard for 38 years, the laugh that had followed me through every house we had lived in, and every car we had owned, and every quiet evening of our long, ordinary, beautiful life together. She said, "No, you weren't." We sat there for a long time. The wind was high, the Pacific was vast and dark. The lantern beside her glowed steadily, casting a small pool of warm yellow light on the basalt and on the grey wool of the coat, and beyond that pool there was nothing but the sea and the night. After a long time she said, "I'm not her, you know that." I said, "I know." She said, "I'm what comes when someone like you spends 7 months wanting something hard enough. I'm not the only one of us. There are many. We come when we are called. We come when the wanting is loud enough. We do not always come in the shape of the dead, but we do when the dead is loud." I said, "Are you going to take me?" She said, "Only if you ask. That's the rule. I cannot offer. You have to ask." I sat there for a long time. The coffee I had poured for her was cooling on the rock. The coffee I had poured for myself was cooling in my hands. I thought about Margaret. I thought about the morning of the diagnosis and the slow walk back to the car in the hospital parking lot, and the way she had taken my hand in the passenger seat and said, "We're going to be okay, Ed. We're going to figure this out." I thought about the chemotherapy. I thought about the hospice. I thought about the last morning, when she had been mostly gone already, but had opened her eyes one final time and looked at me and squeezed my hand. And I had known, the way you know these things, that the squeeze was a goodbye. I thought about our daughter, who lived in Portland, and our son, who lived in Denver, and the 4 grandchildren, and the small dog we had adopted the spring before Margaret got sick, who was staying with our daughter for the duration of my caretaker contract, and who I had not let myself miss, because missing the dog felt small compared to everything else I was missing. I thought about the fact that I had taken this job, in the dead of winter, on a rock in the Pacific, alone, and I asked myself with a kind of honesty I had not let myself have for 7 months, why I had really taken it. The thing beside me, in Margaret's coat, with Margaret's hair and Margaret's voice, waited. It did not press. It did not coax. It sat with the patience of something that had already waited a long time and could wait a great deal longer. I said, "I miss her." It said, "I know." I said, "I miss her so much I cannot stand to live in our house. I miss her so much I came out here to get away from missing her. I miss her so much that for 7 months I have been moving through my days like a man walking through water. I miss her so much that when I saw your light on the 2nd of December, I knew what you were, and I did not call the Coast Guard because I wanted you to come." It said, "I know." I said, "But you are not her." It said, "No, I am not." I said, "And if I asked you to take me, I would not be going to her. I would be going somewhere else, with something that is not her." It said, "Yes." I said, "She would be very angry with me." It made the small laugh again. It said, "Yes, she would." I sat there for a long time with the cooling coffee in my hands. I looked at the lantern. I looked at the grey wool coat. I looked at the back of the head that was Margaret's head, the hair that was Margaret's hair, the small set of the shoulders that I had loved for 38 years. I said, I don't want to ask. It said, I know. I said, I want to, but I don't want to. It said, I know. I said, I think I would like you to go now. It was quiet for a long moment. Then it turned its head just slightly toward me. Not enough that I could see the face, only enough that I could see the line of the cheek and the corner of the eye, and the eye in the lantern light was Margaret's eye, and it was wet. It said, thank you, Ed, for the coffee. I haven't been offered coffee in a very long time. It picked up the cup I had set beside it, and it held the cup for a moment in both hands, the way Margaret had held coffee on cold mornings, and then it set the cup back down on the rock, untouched. It stood up, it picked up the lantern. It walked very slowly across the basalt shelf, and it stepped off the edge of the rock onto the surface of the sea, and it walked away across the water, the small yellow light moving steadily westward toward nothing. And after a while the light grew small, and after a while longer it went out. I sat on the bench until the dawn came. I drank both cups of coffee. They were both cold. I thought about Margaret. I thought about the dog and our daughter and the 4 grandchildren and the small house in Salem that I would have to learn how to live in alone. I went inside when the sun came up. I made breakfast. I ate it. The chopper came at the end of January with the resupply, and the pilot asked me how I was holding up, and I told him, honestly, that I was holding up better than I had been when I arrived. He nodded. He did not ask me what I meant. He left a stack of mail and a box of fresh produce and 3 months of canned goods, and he lifted off, and I watched him go, and I went back inside the cottage. I finished the contract. I finished the 6 months. I came home in late March on a clear, bright day with the dogwoods starting to bloom in the yard, and our daughter met me at the airport with the dog in her arms, and the dog cried when he saw me, and I cried too, and I drove home with my daughter in the passenger seat of my truck, and the dog in her lap, and the chair across from me at the kitchen table was still empty, and it would always be empty, and I sat down across from it that evening, and I had my dinner, and I looked at the chair, and I did not look away. I am writing this 2 years later. I still live in our house. The dog is older now, grey around the muzzle, but he is happy. Our daughter visits often. Our son calls every Sunday. I have started a small woodworking project in the garage, a chest for our oldest grandchild, who is getting married next spring. I am taking my time with it. I want to do it right. Sometimes, on clear nights, I stand in the backyard and I look west, toward the coast, toward the rock that is 100 miles away and that I will probably never see again. I do not look for a light. I do not expect to see one. The thing that came in Margaret's shape did not come because I called for her. It came because I had forgotten how to call for anything else. And what saved me was not refusing it, exactly. What saved me was learning, in the 4 nights I watched her from the window, that I still wanted things. I wanted my daughter. I wanted the dog. I wanted the chest I am building in the garage. I wanted the spring and the dogwoods and the long ordinary years that were still in front of me and that Margaret would not have wanted me to throw away, even for her. The light comes for the people who have stopped wanting. That is what I think now. That is what I have come to believe. I am still going to die. Everyone is. And when I do, I hope I will see her again. I am not certain that I will, but I hope. And if I do not, if there is nothing on the other side of this life but darkness and forgetting, then I hope at least that I made the years between her death and mine into something she would have been proud of. I am trying. Every day, I am trying. Sometimes that is the only light worth carrying.
This has been a story from the other side of now. If you enjoyed this story, like, comment, and subscribe.